Hello, my name is Dale Wilhite. I'm right now in Greenville, Texas. Hope to be in Mississippi by tomorrow evening. If you want to find anything about me, go to MySpace where I have a page. I also have an account with Twitter and Facebook. This here simply is about Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Jerry Lewis. And the question that a lot of people ask sometimes is, were either three, or one of the three, or two of the three, doesn't matter, ever involved in organized crime? And again, to this day, there's still no evidence that that is so. When Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis started their careers off, did they work for people who may have been involved in organized crime? Well, according to the documentaries and so forth, yeah. But that doesn't mean they're involved in organized crime. That doesn't mean they condone what these mobsters did. That doesn't mean they partook of what these mobsters did. That doesn't mean they wanted to associate with these guys. A lot of them were just, these mobsters were just owners of these businesses where they, performed at. Just like the Stardust Casino used to be the most mob-run casino in Vegas. My mother used to work for Bill Boyd, who was the co-owner of the Stardust before it was imploded a few years ago. Does that mean she's a member of organized crime and partook of it? Of course not. Neither were Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin. Both men were performers. They just wanted to perform. They didn't want to hurt anybody. They didn't want to kill anybody. They didn't want to associate with any mobsters. But it just happened to be that some of the jobs that they got were owned by mobsters. That's just the way it was in their day. In the 40s, 50s, and 60s. That's just the way it was. But there's no evidence that these two men have ever, in any way, condoned, partook, or would associated with mobsters. It's not within the character of either man to condone that kind of those kind of people. Dean Martin, he just wanted to sing and be an actor and perform, and he did a magnificent job, and Jerry Lewis did the same thing. Luckily Jerry Lewis is still around, and I hope he's around for a very long time to come. He's had a hard time over the years. You can go online, I guess, and maybe find out what that's about. But he's had a very hard time, and my heart goes out to him because, he's paid a heavy price for being, Jerry Lewis. But as much as bad as things has been for this man, he's still a great American. He's an icon, just like Dean Martin, and he's going to leave a legacy that he has a lot to be proud of. As far as Frank Sinatra, there's no evidence that Frank Sinatra was in the mob. He didn't seem to kill the idea of it or the belief in it because it was probably good for his profile, I guess. It gave him a little clout. It gave insult comics like Don Rickles a lot of material to play with and things like that, and they had a lot of fun with it. But as tough as Frank Sinatra could be, because this guy could be cold sometimes, and he had to be. All three of them had to be at times, and I'm sure Jerry Lewis has to be sometimes now. If they don't, they wouldn't have survived. And as far as Frank Sinatra is concerned, he wouldn't have survived either. Does that mean he didn't know people in organized crime? He probably did. But so did a lot of entertainers. Elvis Presley probably knew people in organized crime, but does that mean Elvis partook of it? No. That's just the business. That's just the kind of people they had to deal with, and sometimes there's not much you can do about it. You just can't do anything about it. You can't go around, especially when you work in Vegas and say, well, are you a mobster? I'm going to work for you. You're not with the mob, are you? Or anything like that. Like that, yeah, I'm with the mob. It's not going to say that. So that's the legacy of Frank Sinatra, is that he didn't really downplay it a lot. I think he got a kick out of it, making people maybe think he was, but he wasn't. This guy wasn't no killer. This guy wasn't no mobster any more than Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin were. They're just three performers who wanted to perform. They did a great job, a magnificent job, and all three have a lot to be proud of. Again, I wish Dean Martin was still around. I wish Frank Sinatra was still around. I like his daughter, Nancy Sinatra. I like all the Sinatras. They're great people. But as far as Jerry Lewis, no, this man, this man couldn't live with himself knowing somebody died or was murdered, and he just looked the other way. That's not within his character. Wasn't in Dean Martin's character either. Again, both men could be tough. They could be, but it was the business that they're in, and that's the only way you can survive. Show business, they say, it's like politics. It's very, very brutal, and if you can't handle it, you got to get out of it. You got to get away from it, because that's what you're having to deal with. A lot of people that can be brutal, and these men had to be tough sometimes to survive. Again, as I said, Jerry Lewis is still around, and I'm thankful that he is. Hope he's around for a long time to come. Which the problems that he was having now, he wasn't happy, and he's having to deal with a few nuts or two, you might say. And hopefully that's been resolved. I haven't heard anything in years, but I hope that's been resolved. But no, Jerry Lewis, Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, they may have known people in organized crime, but they never partook of it. There's no evidence that they have been. And if Frank Sinatra had been in the mob, especially when the rumors started floating, they would have knocked him off. Because the last thing the organized crime needed was a high-profile person like that leading the FBI to them. You know, because if the FBI believed that Frank Sinatra or even Jerry Lewis or Dean Martin were part of organized crime, their phones would have been tapped. They would have been followed around. And mobsters couldn't have high-profile people like that being investigated, and because they would be led right to the mobsters. They'd lead them right to the mobsters as soon as they make a phone call or have a meeting. No, the three men are just three performers. They were great performers. Jerry Lewis is still a great performer, and Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra will have a legacy, you know, that will go on for as long as America goes on, I guess. And that's pretty much it. It's just that I keep hearing on news shows every now and then about these three men, particularly Frank Sinatra, that they're mobsters and they were in the mob. No, they're not. No, there wasn't. There's no evidence of any kind. Again, I'll say it again. The three men are just performers. They're not cold. They're tough. They were tough. They can be very poignant, but they were not cold-blooded. They were not killers. They're not murderers, and they don't look the other way if somebody's going to be harmed. Remember that what happened to Frank Sinatra's son being kidnapped. If he was in the mob, those young men that kidnapped his son, the mob would have got to them before the police did. That you can be sure of. That you could have been sure of. No, they're just three performers. And again, I just wish that Jerry Lewis today is some of the problems that he's had with a few nuts has been resolved. I don't know yet, but let's just hope that it does. And let's just remember the three men, that these are three performers, not mobsters, not killers, not evil men. They're just three performers who are three icons and have a lot to be proud of. And again, I hope Jerry Lewis is around for a long time to come. It's hard to imagine the world without the Jerry Lewis, but then again, it was hard to imagine without Elvis and people like that. But let's just hope that he has a long life and lives at least be 100, maybe more. But no, they're just three performers. That's all there is to it. Thank you for your time. It's just a thought, nothing more.